What the rise is really meant for is for us to get into our embodiment of the highest identity. It's a really extraordinary opportunity because the majority of people that exist on the planet lack awareness or conviction in the truth that we can direct our minds and we can do it in a way consistently enough that it actually rewires our brains. Now, why does that matter? It matters because the way that we perceive the world, the way that we perceive ourselves, the way that we perceive what is possible for us in our life has everything to do with the automations of these neural pathways and these patterns that were created in our mind. What many of you may not know is that your brain is extraordinary and it's an extraordinary efficiency mechanism. Meaning it's imperative for us, in order to move out of survival into thriving, to become efficient in the way that the mechanism of the physical human body operates. And so the brain is beautiful at this efficiency, so much so that some people refer to it as a deletion mechanism. A lot of people think of it as like, oh, it stores all the stuff and it's all of the memories. And though it is also very efficient as an erasing, clearing out, deleting mechanism, because all things that no longer serve us or are not leading to our survival end up getting pruned away within the mind. And in fact, this happens at a rapid rate. The pruning, as we move like through childhood into adolescence, the pruning of the neurosynapses of the brain is so extreme in that brain development period, because what we're doing is the brain is starting to identify what is it we still need in order to survive and master this environment. And whatever it is that isn't helping us to survive or master starts to really fall away. And so you can see how imperative and important those early years are for the formation of who we then become. And it's not just who we become, but it's who we believe ourselves to be. Now, instead of feeling overwhelmed about that, because some of you might think, oh my God, you're looking back and you're like, that was hard for me to survive. I was in a constant state of hypervigilance or flight and fight response. That's actually not an alarming thing. It's alarming when we look at it to say, oh my God, this has created who I am, and now I'm fighting this and I can never undo that. But that's not what this session here today, this event is about. This event is about bringing you into the knowing that you are a conscious director of the mind. And the reason that it's so important to understand that now is that in the early years of our formation, it was happening unconsciously. We weren't saying, I want to remember this, or you weren't saying, oh, I see, this makes me survive, I'm going to do more of this. It was automated based on just the feedback of what we experienced with our environment. And I want to remind you that there is no one reality. Realities are infinite. The way that you experience something is infinitely unique, the way you perceived it. And I want you to remember that, because it means that we get to not only let others off the hook, right? So it's about forgiveness, but it's also just about releasing what we feel someone else was responsible for, and instead holding the space and honoring that which we experienced as our own unique, infinite reality. And then once we're able to hold that kind of space, to recognize that we now get to make a choice. In the beginning, we didn't get to make that same choice. It was unconscious, especially because of the way that the brain is developing and what's coming online. But as we get into adolescence and we start to realize that we can plan for a future, we can organize things to set up certain outcomes, we start to realize that there's a mastering of the mind that's possible for us. And so as an adult, as a beautiful being that you are, now is your opportunity to step into consciously directing the mind. And the rise is really about that. When we're working in Iyanara, in this tier of the rise, of this transformational container where I hold you for 12 months, we are going deep into our beliefs, our identities, the vibration that exists at your core to reharmonize you, to bring you back into that wholeness so that you start to not only create, but magnetize to you the path that you deeply desire to walk upon. And the highest tier after the rise is the creator, because when we get into the clarity of truly embodying the self and knowing the self, we then have this leverage that we can use to start to create the things we desire to create in our lives. Our new offerings, our contributions, maybe they're modalities. Maybe it's just creating the environments you hope to see in the world. And to manifest that, we start to practice not just the sacred strategy around how do we organize ourselves and that which we desire to contribute so that it can not just exist, but be sturdy and healthy, vital in its existence, sustaining in its existence. But we also start to work on the mechanism of the magnetic field that you are, that your heart holds to attract and magnetize things you desire to manifest to you. And so this is the very first steps of us moving in that direction of being able to be conscious creators of our world. First, we must go within. If we desire to change the world, we must start from changing that which is within ourselves. And it's not about changing you. You are already whole. It's about releasing the parts that were never you. And a lot of that also has to do with the ways that we are naturally reacting emotionally to things. And that's where we're going to start today. This week, I'm coming to you because what I want to invite you into is awareness around your emotions and how we perceive the world versus how the world actually is really where this magic lies. For many of you, you know that we are in the greatest awakening period known to mankind, in which we are transitioning from a 3D consciousness of these limits of separation, of war, of just like this individual separateness. And we're beginning to evolve through the 4D into this 5D consciousness in which we are returning to the awareness of the collective whole, that we are not separate, we are one. So there's unity, there's harmony, there's peace that exists when we allow our consciousness, the way that we're perceiving and experiencing the world to transition as is we're being asked to do. All of our challenges, all of the positive and or negative, no matter how you label it, is attempting to transition you into this potential of awakened consciousness and where you feel the unity within the self, within the communities, within the collective. And how we perceive the world is very important, and it's actually a choice. Many people don't realize it's a choice because the other end of that spectrum is this is how the world is. That's 3D consciousness. But in the 5D consciousness, it says this is how I'm perceiving the world. How could I maybe perceive it differently? And so today I want to invite you into awareness around your emotions. One of the greatest things that you can do for yourself is to get curious around what emotion rises and why you're associating a certain meaning with it. Why am I giving this meaning to it? What meaning am I giving to it? Because there is a potential that exists, a little seed that exists within the meaning that you're determining in the experience that can shift. It's almost like you see two different paths in the woods. One can shift us into feeling defeated, limited, separate. And the other can shift us into feeling united, whole, seen, supported. And so there's a choice point that divinity is bringing you into knowing when it comes to your emotional state. And so this is the challenge I came here to give you today for this week. What emotion are you giving your attention to? This may change throughout the day, but I want to invite you into awareness of this each day this week. And start with the inquiry early in the morning. Because there's going to be different emotions that rise. And in fact, there's an infinite amount of emotional experiences that rise. When you look at emotions as frequency, we can talk about the different drastic shifts of emotions like anger versus joy. However, you have to understand frequencies don't necessarily jump from like 0 to 100, right? When we're looking at this gap, it's not one or the other. It travels along this frequency. So when you're looking at it, there's infinite a number of things in between the anger or the joy. And we can label them however we best experience and understand them. This challenge for you is less about the label that you're giving it, because our minds will immediately say pain equals bad, joy equals good. So it's not so much about what name are you giving it, it's awareness of what you're feeling and what that frequency means to you in your life. Because I myself have worked along my own awakening journey long enough where I know that challenge, even though it still spikes the physiological response of that anxiousness, right? I associate the anxiousness with excitement now, this adrenaline spike, right? There's still experiences you're going to have in the physical human body that are automated. However, when I feel something like that, I actually know that it's like the thing that's going to push me into the next phase. And so I start to move that into excitement. I breathe deeper. I know that this is me being asked to lift a weight that I really don't necessarily want to lift. And it's really uncomfortable. And what's on the next side of that is so glorious. I've walked my path long enough and put that faith into practice long enough that I trust it explicitly. I am so convicted in that knowing. And so I share that example with you to help you to understand that you might have emotions that rise that you're labeling as being really bad for you. And there's also, with practice, an opportunity for you to see that that thing you're labeling that is associated as bad, you might eventually see that word, whatever it is, that challenge, that anger, that frustration, the judgment as the key to what you need to see next for yourself. And I can tell you within my own path, and for students of mine, you understand that that's actually what I'm showing you. I'm showing you that judgment is pointing you to something important for you. Sometimes it's things like your standards. What do you value? Maybe it's ways in which you're putting unrealistic standards on the self. But again, a lot of people feel the judgment, they feel the frustration, they feel the anger, and they allow them to get themselves like overly attached to, I don't like this. So we focus all of our attention on it. And then we actually unintentionally end up holding it instead of releasing it. And so my invitation to you is to recognize what emotion you're feeling. You can write down the name. Notice what labels and associations you have, what story you're telling yourself about the emotion you're feeling. And the most important part of this practice isn't to get hyper fixated on trying to like analyze and wrestle and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. Because that transformation that you're seeking isn't available only through this analytical mind. In fact, this awakening is ushering in the divine feminine, which means you're going to have more success right now on the planet when you engage with more yin energy, which is the introspection, the receiving, the going within to look at and just be with, as opposed to the external yang energy of wrestling with things. And so your invitation here for this week is to ask yourself, what emotion am I giving my attention to? Am I investing my energy in? What is the dominant emotion? Because you're going to notice that even if you list all of the different ones throughout your day, there is a dominant one that tends to run you unconsciously more than others. And that isn't your shortfall. That's not like the thing that's actually the opportunity. That's the opportunity for you to go, oh, you've been the one making the calls. You've been the one directing my mind to align it with a neural pathway, a frequency that then makes me think about all the other stuff or feel all the other stuff or believe that my life is this limited. Let me touch on you. Let me see what I can do to shift my attention away from you onto something else. So often on this planet, the biggest shortcoming that we run into when we're trying to heal is that we become addicted to healing. meaning we keep identifying that which we feel is wrong and wrestling with that thing, not realizing that what we're doing in that experience is we're giving all of our attention to the problem, and we're inadvertently communicating to the universe that we believe that this thing isn't going to mitigate itself or it won't move, so I got to just look at it and touch it and wrestle with it and mess with it, right? And we forget that we are actually creating and feeding the source of that which we don't desire. And so you have an opportunity to say, I'm feeling this emotion. I see this story. Like, I see why this keeps rising. There's this pattern, there's this belief. And instead of wrestling with the belief, wrestling with the emotion, I want you to shift and intentionally feel a different emotion that you're desiring to feel. And I want you to practice that. Feelings like gratitude are your way out of all challenges. In fact, Tony Robbins teaches on this a lot. He talks about you cannot be in a state of suffering at the same time as being in a state of gratitude. Now, I know as a spiritual teacher that all things always exist. However, when he's teaching on this, what I believe he is saying is that one is going to be more dominant. And so, yes, the pain might still be there. The suffering, the thing you're working through might still be there. However, I do believe that when you shift into higher states of love and gratitude, you can't be on both frequencies at the same time. So though you might have some of that in your field that's still working itself out, I do believe what Tony says, which is you can't be at this low frequency while feeling this high frequency. You're going to adjust yourself into one. And the more you can start tuning yourself into the higher frequency, the more your life is going to automatically start responding to that which you truly desire. And so your challenge this week is just to be with yourself in non-judgment, but instead choose awareness to hold space to say, oh, this is a dominant emotion that I have been investing my attention to. I'm going to redirect it. And not the judgment that, oh my God, I've been in it all morning, I didn't even realize it, right? Because that doesn't help you. It's when you recognize the emotion, then you choose to shift it into something else you prefer. And I promise when you set the intention at the beginning of the day and you say, today, I am calling in awareness around my emotional state so that I can adjust myself to the frequency I desire. And you make that your prayer, you're going to be able to notice exactly what you're feeling and adjust it much more quickly. That which you ask for, right? Ask and you shall receive. It will be received. And so being in the trust and the belief that you have the capacity, watching your language, as you know, I tell you all the time, watch your language. It's creating everything. Set that beautiful intention for yourself in the day. Today is your day to intentionally start to rewire your brain. And when we rewire our brain, we are rewiring what we're perceiving, what we're experiencing, what we believe is available to us, and suddenly our whole reality starts to shift.